All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. We're going to explore the exact chronological journey your brain takes the very second you or someone you love gets a life-changing medical diagnosis. We'll be looking at the totally fascinating and honestly sometimes really frustrating ways our minds react to absolute crisis. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how we can navigate that biological response to actually take back our agency. Picture this. You're sitting in a doctor's office, you're 65 years old, and you hear the words metastatic prostate cancer. In that moment, your mind just completely freezes. We really have to start here because it immediately validates that terrifying stillness of a major diagnosis. When those heavy words hit you, it is not a metaphor. Your mind literally stops processing. The room gets weirdly quiet, time kind of slows down, and you just feel entirely detached from reality. Now get a load of this staggering statistic. Patients actually forget up to 80% of medical information during high-stress consultations. 80%! You could literally walk right out of your doctor's office and have absolutely zero memory of the treatment plan they just spent 20 minutes explaining to you. But here is what I really want you to understand. This reaction is not a weakness. It's definitely not a failure of your intelligence. It is just pure, hardwired biology.
So let's look at stage 1, the stillness of shock.
Right when those words hit, your mind completely shuts down new information processing. Let's dig into the neuroscience of this dissociation for a second. Psychologists actually call it an acute stress-induced disruption of executive function. Basically, your brain's internal alarm system, the amygdala, detects this massive existential threat and starts firing rapidly. To protect you from that overwhelming flood of information, your reasoning center, the prefrontal cortex, just temporarily goes completely offline. Your brain is essentially throwing you straight into survival mode. It's a protective mechanism, and it's working exactly the way it was designed to. Which brings us to stage 2, the urge to escape. Obviously, you can't stay frozen forever, right? As that initial biological shock starts to wear off, fear rushes in, causing patients to quietly try and run away from reality. And this is a brilliant illustration of how tricky that flight response can actually be, because it really likes to masquerade as careful, rational thinking. Like, healthy skepticism asks, okay, what's the evidence? Maybe I should get a second opinion just to confirm the plan. It naturally moves toward the evidence. But flight-driven denial, that asks, how can I prove this diagnosis is wrong? It actively hunts for flaws in the doctor's logic, just to avoid facing the truth. It's the psychology of, well, maybe they made a mistake. And really, it's simply your mind trying to buy you some time. Moving right along to stage 3, reclaiming agency, the fight. Eventually, running away just costs way more energy than actually confronting the thing. So you enter this messy, totally exhausting stage where your prefrontal cortex finally boots back up, and you transition from raw fear into really intense action. During this fight stage, you're going to be making massive choices, but we've got to highlight a major danger here, which is burnout. There is an absolutely critical difference between pressure-driven decisions, those reactive choices you make out of pure panic and a totally false sense of urgency, and strategy-driven decisions, which are intentional choices that actually align with your personal priorities. You do not have to make perfect decisions right now, but you do need to pause long enough to make strategy-driven ones. Look, to survive this fight stage without totally burning out, you literally cannot do this alone. You have to delegate. You need specific support roles filled by your trusted friends and family. You're going to need a medical advocate to take notes at your appointments, an emotional anchor just to sit there with you in the fear, a logistics coordinator to handle the crazy schedule, a truth teller to call you out when you start spiraling, and hope keeper to remind you exactly why you're fighting in the first place. Handing out these roles, it is absolutely essential for your survival. Now for stage 4, the missing stage, focus. If you manage that fight stage well, you reach the real climax of your journey, where all that frantic action finally transforms into clear-headed strategy. Honestly, most books on illness completely ignore this stage. They just end with, hey, keep fighting. But the crucial thing you need to understand is that focus is not the absence of fear. It is definitely not some state of perfect Zen-like peace. Focus is just the ability to think clearly while you're afraid. It's holding two totally different truths in your head at the exact same time. This is absolutely terrifying, and I can still make good decisions. It's that super valuable skill of separating your raw, intense emotion from your tactical execution. So how do we actually achieve this focus? Well, we use structured frameworks. Here is a super practical, step-by-step framework for making impossible decisions when you are basically terrified. First, identify the actual decision. Second, list out your priorities. Third, gather the relevant info. Fourth, consult your trusted people. And fifth, make the decision and just commit. You can also use things like the regret minimization test, which is just asking yourself which choice you'll regret the least if things go wrong. Or the 6-month perspective, where you ask if whatever is panicking you right now will even matter in 6 months. These frameworks are amazing for cutting right through all that overwhelming medical noise. Let's look at stage 5, bridging the family gap. Okay, let's zoom out to your external ecosystem for a minute. A patient's internal psychological journey often clashes really dramatically with their family's timeline, creating this kind of asynchronous processing. Basically, your family is going through the exact same 4 stages you are, but they are on a delay. If you're in the fight stage, totally ready to act, but your spouse is in flight and avoiding the topic entirely, don't demand they do research. Just ask them to attend one single appointment. Or if you're in focus and feeling at peace with the plan, but your family is in fight mode, frantically texting you random alternative therapies, just give them a specific logistics task to channel all that nervous energy. Your family isn't abandoning you, I promise. They're just navigating their own biological stress response.
And finally, Section 6, the ecosystem, the doctor's blind spot.
You know, this asynchronous processing actually extends straight into the medical team, too. It perfectly explains why doctors and patients so often feel like they are speaking two completely different languages. It all comes down to a core disconnect. See, doctors are highly trained to provide medical clarity, giving you flawless, evidence-based data delivered as efficiently as possible. But patients, whose nervous systems have literally been hijacked by fear, totally lack emotional clarity. So the doctor delivers these facts, but the patient's biological inability to encode memories in that freeze or flight state means almost nothing actually sticks. Doctors really have to learn to recognize these psychological stages and pace their information out, rather than just assuming a quietly nodding patient is actually understanding them.
Ultimately, getting through this whole journey requires hope. But, and this is a big but, not all hope is created equal. False hope is basically magical thinking. It's denying reality, assuming the lab tests are somehow wrong, or just ignoring treatments entirely. Grounded hope, on the other hand, fully acknowledges the severe, scary reality of the diagnosis, but it completely refuses to surrender to it. And here's the best part. Grounded hope actively engages the brain's reward system, which actually leads to much better treatment adherence and real-world survival outcomes.
I really want to leave you all with this provocative thought today. When a crisis hits, your brain's alarm system is going to take over. That is just biology. But you do not have to stay frozen, and you certainly do not have to stay in flight mode. So how will you apply these frameworks of grounded hope and focus to reclaim your agency during life's most terrifying uncertainties? You might not be able to control a medical diagnosis, but as we've seen throughout this explainer, you can absolutely learn the skill of clarity.